Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FTD webinar titled, Are You Ready for Your Close-Up? Featuring Suzie Kostick AIFD. As a quick housekeeping note, Suzie will be taking questions during the session. If you have a question for her, simply type it in the chat box in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Suzie.
Welcome, and welcome to everybody who's joining us from near and far. I'm really excited to be here again this week as a follow-up to our design program last week. We had some great people attending and some great questions, some of which we'll address towards the end of today's session. But I know that everybody's very busy, so taking time out of your busy day to join us really means a lot, not only to me, but to the team at FTD. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So we are going to do a recap of last week's design show. For those of you who joined us, this will just be a little refresher. For those of you who were not able to join us last week, I think, Janet, if it's true that they can watch a video of this, is there a way for them to watch a video of last week's recording?
Yep, it is loaded on FTDI in our webinar and design show archives. I can drop the link in the chat.
That'd be awesome. It might be worth your time to go and visit that and check it out after we've gone through today. But as a quick little recap, we talked about designing for the camera. So it was a design show where I actually created designs and spoke about some of the differences of creating designs for a customer who's taking it out of the shop, or creating something that you're actually just creating for photography. We spoke a little bit about one-dimensional versus three-dimensional. It was just a little reminder that the camera sees things one-dimensionally and we see things three-dimensionally. So when you're photographing something and it doesn't look the same on camera as it did when you're looking at the arrangement, chances are it's because you're looking at it three-dimensionally and the camera's only picking it up one-dimensionally. Just as a reminder, the mind's eye fills in all the gaps. It fills in all the boo-boos and all the misalignments or dark holes, and your mind can do that when we see three-dimensionally, where the camera can't think. It can't do that, right? So it sees things very clearly. And that's why using photography, if you're going to be testing for any kind of evaluation or practicing for competition, taking photographs of your designs while you're practicing is a really good tool for you to see where maybe your line or your balance or your focal emphasis is off in a design. So it's not just for using it to use for promotional and social media. It's a good way to learn how to design and correct, your weak areas and make stronger some areas that you are really practicing on for other areas. So also we talked about how the principles and elements are amplified. And what I mean by that, and I'll have some examples of that later in our presentation, is that again, because the camera is seeing one-dimensional, it's picking up all the empty spots and all the flaws, or all the areas where your line maybe isn't quite as perfect as it seems to be in your mind eye when you're looking at it. So it's going to be very amplified if there is line that is not completely straight, where you have something maybe crisscrossing that shouldn't be crisscrossing, and it's diverting the eye away from your focal point. So the elements and principles are amplified. So be mindful when you're designing for photography that you've got clean principles and elements of design. Be mindful of color. We all know that darker colors are harder to see in photographs. This is really important when you're designing for wedding work. We know that that's going to be photographed by a lot of people. And so just be mindful of your color placement in your arrangement. We talked about not hiding the container. And again, you'll see some examples of that as we go through the presentation. But we talked a little bit about, we don't want the arrangement to either look like it's floating above the container or that it doesn't have a container at all, because often times a container is selected because of the color, and it is necessary to pull the entire design together. And again, when you're looking at it, in real life, as opposed through a camera's eye, you know that it has a certain color or a certain texture or a certain quality that is important to the entire composition of the design. So designing for photography means you don't always want to hide the container. You have to make allowances so that you can see the container. Flower positioning for photography, when you're creating a design for everyday use, whether it's going in your cooler for sale or whether it's going out the door for a delivery, you're designing usually for a complete 360 view. Even if it's a one-sided arrangement, you're really designing it in real life for a complete 360 view. And so you'll place your flower, the faces of the flower, a good example is a sunflower. You use that face of that sunflower to help with your focal emphasis, to help with your line. Well, in photography, that doesn't always work. So you have to really watch the positioning of your flowers when you're looking through the camera lens. Check your designs just before you stop taking your photographs. It's best to look at your designs, take a picture of them, and check it within the camera. Last week, I held up a photo mat, the little framing mat that was a 5x7 frame, and I could look through that mat to kind of square in my design. That's one way to do it. Or now with phones, it's just so easy to like take a quick snapshot and then check your design to see what it looks like on your camera, and you'll be able to see any open spaces or holes or anything like that that you need to fill in. Tricking the camera, that's something that's kind of fun to do, is by positioning flowers in certain ways or bringing flowers towards the back of the arrangement. You can trick the camera into thinking it's a full-blown arrangement design all the way around, where if you're just designing for photography, you don't always have to fill in everything. You can just put a little flower here, a little blossom there, another little piece of green there, and you can trick the camera into thinking it's a full arrangement. That gets a little trickier, but I just want to, there is possibilities to trick the camera, and I'll show you some of the examples of where we did that later in the presentation. Creating designs for photography versus creating designs for retail. And that's kind of where we're heading now. That's what we're leading into, and what the discussion is going to be for today is, I don't want you to be discouraged. I know when I had my retail flower shop, and even when I help people and do freelance work, I am the last person to take photographs of things because I'm really concentrating on the orders and meeting the deadlines and getting things set up. And I'm not the person, I'm not the person out there clicking, with my phone in front of me, clicking photographs. And then I get to the end of the day or the end of the event, and I realize I don't have any really great photographs of some beautiful designs that we created. And I'm sure that's a lot of what's going on with you. If you're busy in your flower shop, you've got day-to-day things to keep in mind, and you don't always have the time to snap photographs. And so hopefully some of the tips and some of the suggestions that we're going to talk about this afternoon are going to help you be a little bit more mindful of how easy it is, and how you can fit the time into your schedule to get these really important photographs for your social media and for your website. Excuse me. So we also talked a little bit about the top 4 tricks for great photography: lighting, angle, great flowers, and location. And so we're going to touch upon those lightly throughout the discussion. But really, if you have good lighting, and it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be equipment lighting, it can just be natural lighting. In fact, I prefer natural lighting. If you have the right angle, you have great flowers, and you have a nice location to put your arrangement, those 4 tricks right there are going to help you have success in taking photographs. So I just wanted to briefly go over some of the different styles of photography and maybe why, if you're like me and you look through people's Instagram pages and you're like, oh my gosh, these images are beautiful. How come mine aren't coming out like that? Or, what does it take to get those beautiful photographs? I wanted to add this in so that you understand you're not a failure if you're not capturing those beautiful photographs. And there's a reason behind them and a reason why you're seeing so many of them. And so I just want to go over this just so that you're comfortable knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. So the style photo shoots, very popular right now. A lot of florists, and I think every industry in some way, shape, or form are doing styled photo shoots. And that's what you see a lot on Instagram. That's what you see a lot on Pinterest. And really, these are elaborate, very over the top way to collect photographs, but they have some value. And I'm not saying that you should be doing these all the time, but if you have an opportunity to partner with one of them, that's great. Or if you want to take one on yourself when you have time, again, I know most of you don't have time to do all this, then do that. But a style shoot is really a storytelling style of photography. You have lots of different elements within the photographs that really tell a story without you even having to write words or explain it. Just by looking at the picture itself tells a story. They can be done for your own promotional purposes because you want to build your portfolio, or you could be hired to do them for maybe you've got a venue that is wanting to really highlight some new decor they have, and they want to bring in some other vendors to make the space beautiful. You could actually say that you are for hire to do style shoots for different types of companies. So it's not only a way for you to spend money, it may be a way for you to make money too. So keep that in mind. They always or usually involve different types of vendors, whether it's rental companies, whether it's locations like hotels or banquet rooms or parks or whatever. There's usually more than one person involved. And of course, it usually requires a professional photographer. Don't expect that you're going to get all these different shots, you yourself as the florist, okay? Don't beat yourself up and think that if you do a styled shoot, you have to be the photographer. Really, this requires and involves professional photographers, if not one, often several. So of course, that then leads that there are, budgets and times that are required. These are expensive and these are time consuming. But the advantages to this is that you get lots of different pictures to use in your portfolio, on your website, and in your social media. And if they're planned properly, you can pretty much do 6 to 1 year worth of photographs that will certainly enhance your marketing needs. So a styled shoot is very popular, but this isn't necessarily where your wheelhouse is going to be. So don't beat yourself up thinking that you have to do styled shoots in order to get some really good marketing photographs. The next step would be a lifestyle shoot. And these usually are photographed in real life settings, whether they're homes. I can tell you that when I was publishing the magazine, we often went into spec homes, into homes that were being built by different contractors. And these were their houses that the people toured to see whether or not they wanted to buy within that community. And we would rent out the houses and use those for our photograph settings. And they could be done commercially in a commercial location, in a real life home setting, whatever, but they're usually done in such a way that it makes the arrangement look like, oh, that's how I would use it in my home, or that's how I would use it in my office. They can be created around a theme, allows for quite a bit of creativity because of how you're going to place it and how you're going to stage it. It does require a budget. It usually requires a professional photographer as well. Obviously, it requires time. It's not something that you can do while you're doing your daily business. You need to literally schedule a day or two to design everything and then go on location. And it can provide a lot of different, images for your portfolio. So they are good to consider, but again, this is not the type of photography we want to talk about. But you need to be aware that a lot of the images you're seeing are because people invested in this. And if you have the time and investment, great. But again, we're talking about how can you make a difference in your everyday doings of your business, where you can take really great photographs that you can use instantly. Studio, these are pretty much done for promotional reasons. They are photographed in a very controlled setting. They can be created around a theme. Creativity is focused on the subject rather than the setting. So you really want to make sure that your designs speak something, that they say something, because you're not enhancing it with other background pieces. It requires, quite an extensive setup of proper lighting, proper backdrops. Again, this is one of these where it's not going to be where you're going to have the studio set up in your flower shop. You're not going to have the space. It requires a lot of space. It requires time. It requires a professional photographer who understands lighting. The only good thing with this is that it does make it really easy to edit the photographs in post-production, although I don't recommend creating designs that need a lot of editing. It just takes time and money. So those are the three types of photographs that a lot of what you see stems from that, because people are investing in that, or people, I see that a lot with people coming into the industry who don't have access to daily flowers, who are not doing daily orders. So the only way that they can build their portfolio for their websites and social media pages is to do these 3 extensive kind of photo shoots. Whereas you, who are in a regular daily setting in a flower shop, you're doing designs every day, hour by hour, minute by minute. You're creating beautiful creations. So this is really your type of photography. We call it the selfie style. That's just kind of how I've termed it. I don't really know that it has a name, but it combines the storytelling with the promotional. They're usually done on the spur of the moment because you created something that's really beautiful and you want to capture it before it goes out the door. It can be done in a variety of settings, up against a backdrop, up against a wall, outside of your flower shop, inside of your flower shop. Really, it can be created anywhere. It requires very little space. Really, all you need is some good or interesting lighting, and you can capture a great photograph. Requires only a few moments, because literally you're standing in front of a wall, holding a design, and somebody in front of you is clicking the photograph. Or if you have a tripod, you can actually use a little sensor, and you can take your own picture. And it requires just really the minimum of a really good cell phone camera. And quite often they include people. And I think that's where the storytelling comes in, is when you include people in these types of selfie style storytelling promotional photographs. So if there's any questions, again, I want to encourage you to ask your questions. Just go ahead and type them in, and Janet will just interrupt us, or we can wait to the end depending on the question. But I really would encourage you, if something comes up in your mind, ask the question, because chances are somebody else on here is also wondering the same thing. Okay, so equipment. As I said last week, we're not really going to talk a whole lot about equipment, and that's because everybody has their own preferences. And for those of you who are really just starting out thinking, okay, how can I start getting more photographs that I can add to my website, that I can use on my social media page? What do I need? What is the minimum I need in order to start this, right? That's what I want. And let's keep it simple. This is what you need. You need to invest in a really good cell phone that has a really good camera, that has portrait mode abilities. If you have that, you can achieve many, 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 many great photographs. And that will get you familiar with working with angles, working with lighting. Really, I don't encourage anybody to go out and invest in cameras. If you have one, great, use it. But honestly, if you're just starting out and you want to do it, make sure you have a really good cell phone camera. And the reason I say invest in a really good cell phone with a really good camera is because we all know we live on our cell phones. So if you're going to invest in one good piece of equipment that's going to be used for a multitude of different things, it's a little computer, it's your phone, it's a camera, invest in a really good cell phone camera. And whatever brand you prefer, all the different brands, the Samsung, all the iPhones, they all have great cameras. You just have to do a little research of whatever brand you like, and they all offer some really great options. Once you've mastered the cell phone camera, then you can start considering adding all the different things, more sophisticated camera equipment, you know, the little light boxes that you can set up, tripods, backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. But really, I really highly recommend start here. This will give you a ton of great photographs, I promise you. And then once you really get into it and you really want to keep expanding, then you can invest in all this stuff. Really, we want to keep it simple. We want to make you successful. And if you start off here, it's going to be overwhelming. You're going to feel like you have to clear out a space in your flower shop to set up a light box or to set up a background. And even the little pull down thing, I know several flower shops that I have been in have just a little roll up screen that they pull down and then they can set the arrangement in front of it. That's okay, but you still have to then clear off the desk and clear everything around it and make sure the lighting is really good in that area. That's why I'm like, just let's look at other options before we go there. So last week, the designs I created, I said I was going to go ahead and photograph all of them. And then we were going to talk about the photographs so that you can actually see some of the things that we talked about, you know, the angles, the lighting, the flower positioning, the line, elements and principles, how it actually looks in a photograph. So this was the first design we created. And you can kind of see here, I mean, it's a nice photograph. It really isn't, it isn't beautiful. It's a nice photograph, right? The one thing that you can notice here is if you look down to the middle left section, you can see the container peeking through. And that is a really good example. Even in a mediocre photograph, you can see the container. If I were to move just a little bit, if I would have made that arrangement where I would have normally completely covered in that baseline, you know, where the arrangement meets the container, you wouldn't see that container. And in the photography, in the photo, the finished photo, it would look like that arrangement had no container. So it wouldn't have been grounded. So just leaving that little peekaboo area gives the story or the mind's eye something to rest on. It gives it a more solid focal point area. Now you can see off to the right in this illustration here, there's my little stick figure of somebody standing directly in front of the arrangement. And it's the average angle or where we hold the cell phone. And if you notice, if you ever watch people, when they're holding a cell phone, it's right about here, right? It's right about in the area between somebody's nose or, you know, their shoulder area, right around the neck areas where most people hold their cell phones when they're taking a picture. And that often creates an angle that's too high. That's not interesting. And it results in this type of photograph. Now, mind you, I'm only 5'2". So if anybody who's taller, you know, if you're 5'5" or 6 foot tall, you're even going to have a more distorted image because you're up higher and you're holding your camera high and you're holding it down. So keep in mind that that's not necessarily the best place to hold your camera, right? Or your cell phone when you're taking the photograph. Here's a much more interesting picture. And really it was achieved by me just squatting down a little bit and pointing the lens more into the center of the arrangement, more where those two tulips just come down over the container. That's really where my focal area was, where I pointed the camera. Again, I used the portrait mode. I didn't move back or forward between this arrangement or that. I stood in the exact same spot. All I did was actually, for me, because I'm so short, I was able to just lower the camera. I didn't really even have to crouch down like the diagram on the right there is showing. I just needed to lower my phone down more to my waist as opposed to up around my shoulders and neck area. And it created a much more interesting picture. You can see the comparison side by side there. And again, you're showing the container that's grounding the arrangement. You're putting money into the container, so you definitely want to make sure it's shown, because a lot of times color or texture is important to the overall story of the composition. So why hide it? So you can see the comparison between the two shots, very, side by side there, by just crouching down a little bit, a different perspective. And then I just went and around the house, and I'll be honest with you, I did 4 designs last week, and I took a picture of each of them in these 4 different locations, up against a solid wall, outside, and then in 2 places within my home. So this is just in my house. There was absolutely no additional lighting required. This is all natural lighting, and it's really just my phone on portrait mode. So you can see the different types of photographs. And all of these are, quite honestly, Instagram, worthy. They are easy to put onto your website. They would be a sellable arrangement. If you want something a little more less cluttered, go back to this design for your website if you're trying to sell that. Or if you want some more interesting, then you have these. But I always recommend trying to get a couple different shots, because if this is the one you're going to use on your website because you want it to be just the arrangement showing, this is what you're going to want to post on your social media, because that's what people look at. They don't necessarily want to see that on social media. They want to see this on social media. This is what gives everybody the feels. This is what makes people connect with an arrangement, when it kind of has that little story in behind it, whether it's out in the garden or in somebody's decor. They relate that to their own home. They relate it to their own lifestyle. They connect with the arrangement. So this is really what you would want to use on your social media. Or if you want to have a gallery on your website, these would be the type of pictures you would put in your gallery, where this might be something you want to put like in your selection guide area where you're selling the arrangement. Another example, we talked a little bit, about the elements and principles being very obvious and very exaggerated in a design. And so this was a good example of like how you need to have a really clean line in your design, because once it's photographed, any little thing that's out of line or crisscrossing your intended lines in this parallel looking design would be over exaggerated. In my own mind, when I'm looking at this design, I wish I would have cleaned up that one little piece of eucalyptus a little bit more and moved it closer to the roses. So I would even have a cleaner definition there, but it's not too bad. But you can see the Veronica is very much in line. You can still see it, but it still has its line. It's not confusing the line in any way. So, and again, that's from photographed in just front of a plain wall, standing directly in front of it, again, with the camera up around my, my neck area, holding the camera about there. So then here's a slightly more interesting angle. And this photograph was just taken in the photograph mode. This was taken in the portrait mode. What it does is it softens up that back line of the table, so you don't have a real defined line. It's more soft. It falls off to the back. It also kind of washes. I have textured walls in my house, and so using the portrait mode softens the texture, so it just looks like a plain background. And then by me, I moved over slightly. I just took one step to the left, and then again, I got lower. I lowered my camera. I had a more interesting angle, and you can see where now that piece of eucalyptus in this photograph is actually in great line, where in the one before it kind of stuck out a little bit. Now that little piece is exactly in line with that beautiful rose. And so that's how you trick the camera. That's how you can manipulate your designs, by stepping just a little off to the angle. You create a whole new different look. And then we have, again, I just put these in the same locations in my house. And what's interesting is the arrangement never moved, okay? So where I placed the arrangement on that ledge and then also on the table, I never moved the arrangement. I moved either one step or two steps. I never backed up. I just moved one step or two step. and then just held the camera a little bit at different little angles so that I could get some interesting shots and interesting angles. Do we have any questions so far, Janet?
We do have a question from Penny. She was asking, and this is back to kind of the style shoots and that. She was asking, what style would you recommend for gift baskets?
What style of photography?
Yeah, if you were doing like gift baskets, or yeah.
I would start off with Penny. I would start off with that real simple, the selfie style, much like what we're doing here, and then go into some studio shots. And I have some examples of those later in the slide. So maybe once we get to that, we'll go a little more in detail, and I'll speak a little more specifically to your question there. Okay, so again, that would be something that you may want to put on in your actual e-commerce where you want to sell that arrangement. That's one of your in-store specials that you want to promote for this month. So that would be the photograph I would use for that. So it's a clean photograph. It's on an interesting wooden table as opposed to just a white background. I think that shows that kind of softens the look a little bit more. Instead of like in a white box, it's just going to be the white arrangement. Or if you put a backdrop, a white piece of paper or backdrop, it's going to be white on white. I think this just softens it enough and has that bridge between studio photography and lifestyle photography. So to me, this is more preferable to the consumer in today's market. So this is something I would use in the e-commerce part where you want somebody to order off that picture. They can see the flowers very easily. They can see the varieties of flowers used. They can see the type of container that is being used, and it's not real messy, and they can really see exactly what they're purchasing. But then on your social media, I would go then to something more like this type of photography. Like, this is our new shop special for the month, check our website and order it today. And then they can go to the website, they can see the other photograph of it. And then again, here's a comparison. So standing in the exact same location, the photograph on the far left is what the picture looked like in just regular picture mode. You see everything behind it. You see the houses behind it. You see my overgrown garden behind it. I mean, it's everything. But standing in the exact same spot, putting it on a portrait mode, the other two pictures were taken. So it blurred out everything just enough that it shows that it's in an outdoor garden setting, but still let the emphasis be on the arrangement itself. Now, this is a really good example of sometimes the photography can go wrong, and it doesn't always work perfectly. And so you have to be mindful. And as much as I preach the portrait mode as a way to start using your cell phone cameras in an easy way to get photographs, keep in mind that portrait mode on a cell phone is not the same as depth of field or aperture on a camera where you control it. The portrait mode is actually an in phone or in camera filter that is applied to the photograph for you. So we all have all these wonderful filters that we can use on photographs. What they've done with portrait mode is they've added that filter automatically. So by snapping the picture, it automatically applies the filter. So you don't really have control over it. So you have to be really mindful of your background. If you look in the two photographs, the middle one and the one on the right, that very top Lysianthus, I didn't notice it until way after, because I wasn't checking my photographs. It appears to be floating. It appears to have no stem whatsoever. And that's where using filters can distort your photograph to the point of it not looking real. Last week we had a question about filters. Somebody says, what about using filters, to change your photographs? They're helpful, but if you don't use them properly and you don't check what you're doing, you get this. You get the floating Lysianthus photograph. Now, it's not horrible. And the one in the middle, you can kind of see the stem, and the one on the right, it's literally just floating. that's why when I said earlier, check your designs, check it. Don't just take one photograph and assume you've got it. Take 2 or 3 or 4, check it, and it's so easy. You just quick, you know, you tap, and you're taking multiple photographs. So don't just take one and assume you have the right photograph, because you might end up with this boo-boo here like I have. Okay, I wanted to show you, these are the other 2 designs that we created, I created last week. And I just wanted to show you the setup, that how simple it is. It's just a wooden table. This is actually in one of my spare bedrooms in my house, and it's just up against the wall. And really the only difference is in the photo on the right, the sun went behind clouds, and then on the photo on the left, I had full sun in the room. This bedroom has 1 window in it, so it's all natural lighting. There was no overhead lighting, no anything else except the camera on the phone in my bedroom, sitting on a table. I also made sure the table was pulled out from against the wall. That is really key in any kind of photography. It's so often that we back up an arrangement too close to whatever's behind it. Even if it's just a piece of paper backdrop or it's in one of those light boxes, putting the arrangement too close to the back doesn't give enough depth to the image. It takes away from its interest, it takes away from its character, and you see the back of the paper, whether it's a piece of paper or it's a wall or whatever it is. You want to make sure you have a distance. 12 to 18 inches is minimum. If you can even do, 24 to 36, that's even better. But I know realistically in a flower shop, you don't always have that kind of space. So at least try to leave 12 inches between where you place the arrangement and whatever it's going to hit. Then I put the arrangement in the center of the table. I wanted to make sure that I had enough table in the foreground. So if I wanted to do any cropping, I could do cropping, and then again, enough in the background. So you can see there, my table was pulled away from the wall, and then the arrangement was sat in the center of the table. So then here are some more of just, different angles and creative shots. Again, I'm standing in the exact same location as I was here. I just put the phone in portrait mode and lowered the camera so that I could get actually the container, the flowers, and the pretty faces of the flowers. Now here in the one on the right, you see where, I see the face of that top sunflower. When I originally placed it in there, I would normally place it facing the back in an all-around design, but I knew I was going to be photographing it. So I wanted to make sure that I had that center tipping forward, because in the photograph, I wanted to make sure that the viewer could see all those pretty little faces of the sunflower to actually really, make the arrangement pop and make it feel like they're actually looking at it in real life. And again here, just 2 shots on that same table of this design, slightly different angles, one straight on, one I've taken a little step to the left. But again, you can see the container. It's not overpowering the arrangement. It's just there to add that soft color so that the entire arrangement is telling the story. And again, the same photograph in all the different areas. And the same photograph. Okay, we have some additional tips here. So some of the things questions that were raised last week were, can you photograph more than one design at a time? And yeah, absolutely you can. And this is where, Penny, it might help you with some gift basket designs, because you may want to show the completed gift basket and then maybe pull out a few of the key items, the theme items, if you're doing themed baskets, and just, have them staged in front of it. And really what it is keep in mind that when you're staging something like this, you're staging it very much with the elements and principles of design. Where does the eye flow to? Where does it look? You want balance, you want symmetry or asymmetry, depending. You can see in the one on the far left, we have two things, you know, a smaller arrangement and an arrangement in the lavender container on one side, and then we have the rabbit in the other arrangement on the right side. And they're all balanced by color and they're balanced by size, so that it makes sense. If I were to have all three arrangements the exact same size, it would not be as interesting. But by having, you know, something smaller and then something taller and then something just slightly shorter, and then that rabbit, it balances. So you could do that very easily, Penny, with your gift baskets by placing your gift basket over to the left, like those two arrangements are, one item there, and then take two items out of your gift basket that you want to feature, maybe you know, depending on the theme of it, two things that really represent the theme, products, and place those off kind of to the front and to the side and take your picture that way. And that will give you some great shots for the e-commerce part of it if you have them on your website for people to order. Adding little items like the butterflies or the green mat that you see will help kind of like weight down. It helps give a grounding point, a focal point to things that have multiple images in them. But you can easily, just by placing things, you never want to line things up like little soldiers in a row, 1, 2, 3. Not that you can't, but it's harder to photograph and it's harder for you to tell your story. That's usually something that's left for somebody that has a lot of experience with photography and how to capture the right angle. But by just, you know, juxtaposing a little bit, giving them a little depth and space between it, you can easily photograph multiple items in one photograph. Interesting angles. So you can see here the photo on the left with the little spider arrangement. That's just one of those kind of straight in front of it, a little bit lower, so I can, you know, see the container and see the arrangement, and it's pretty and it's cute and it's nice. But then the next arrangement shows with a little more interesting angle. And this might require you to have a little step stool depending on how tall you are. But it just, sometimes it's fun to add those little accessories in and give it an interesting angle so that you have something that can be used to sell from, and then something that can be used in your social media. So don't just think that you've got one snap of a picture. Try to take a couple different angles, and that will give you more depth of use of photographs. And when you're using a phone as opposed to a camera and lighting equipment, you have the luxury of, you know, the few seconds it takes to snap multiple photographs. The design on the right, this is a really good example of how your elements and principles are amplified in this design. When we created it, again, in my mind's eye, that was a very vertical, very straight arrangement, but you can see the branch definitely has a curve off to the left in the one arrangement. And so, although it was a really cool design and it isn't awful, to me that's very distracting, and I didn't like it. All I would have had to do, really, if I would have noticed it, is kind of turn it around so that it had a straighter angle, but I didn't. Luckily, because I wanted to get creative, I took some different angles of the arrangement. And by taking the different angles, again, just like in that previous arrangement, I kind of hid the fact that I had kind of a jutting out line to the left, especially in that lower design there. You can see the container, you can see, you know, some of the candy corn as a little accent around it, but yet the entire arrangement, the vertical design of it, is very straight. So again, have some fun with your angles when you're taking them, and it also will give you more options to use based on website, e-commerce selling, you know, designs, as well as interesting things to post on social media. Don't forget the close-up. So again, I'm just kind of repeating what I said, is that here is something that has multiple pieces. You see them they're not all lined up like little soldiers. They each have their own space. One's farther back, that's the taller one, and then the other two are, one's off a little bit to the right, one's off a little bit to the left. These are great if you do in your shop collections. And when I had my shop, I always designed in collections. I always made sure I had 2 or 3 or 4 different designs that all fit within a theme, and that was my monthly special. So this is a good example of that. Like this is, going into fall especially, maybe this is your September specials, and you have 3 different designs that all kind of coordinate, that all tell kind of the same story, and you want to feature them on your website and your social media. So you take a picture of all 3 of them together, and then you go in and you get some close-ups of some of the different arrangements that then will further tell the story on your social pages and on your website. But designing for collections is a great way to, make sure that you have something for everybody's price point and everybody's taste, but it's also a fun way to get some really great photographs. Last week we had several people ask questions about photographing wedding flowers. I really don't know what the questions were, but from my professional standpoint, and I can tell you that I am not a photographer at all. I am not a photographer. My background is working in a publishing company as the creative director and editor. And so my place was, I was the designer. Obviously I designed the arrangements, but I staged them and I set them up, and I worked with some amazing professional photographers who taught me a lot about photography and how to see an arrangement through the camera's eye and how to position things. So when it comes to lighting and it comes to, all the different features of all the fancy cameras, I know enough to get me in trouble. So I'm really hesitant to talk about photographing wedding flowers as a professional, because that's not what I do. But I can tell you that everything on here, even though there was a photographer with me photographing a lot of this, what I learned to do is I followed the photographer around. I'm like, oh, he's standing here and getting that shot of that arrangement, or he's standing here and getting that shot of that arrangement. So I just went behind them and took pictures with my camera, my phone camera, in the lighting that was available in the room. So I can honestly tell you that all of these photographs right here were taken on a cell phone camera. So it's possible to get some really cool shots. But if you're wanting to have great variety of images for your wedding stuff, honestly, I believe that goes under, a style photo shoot, and you really need to work with a professional photographer and do that. That's not something, I kind of equal it to, we're florists and we're professionals at doing flowers. And how many times have we worked with somebody, say the baker, who just wanted you to, give them a few stems so they could put them on the cake, and you get there and you see it, and it's just not, the flowers have not done the cake justice, and they just don't look well. It's because we get upset because somebody who's not a florist decided to take the flowers into their own hands just because they thought they could. Well, a lot of times when it comes to photography, it's the same thing. If you're not a skilled, trained photographer, don't expect yourself to be able to take that level of photographs. Give yourself some grace and work with what you have, and leave that to the professionals, because that's what they're trained in, that's what they do, and we should respect that, and we should encourage that, and we should partner with that. So when it comes to photographing weddings, depending on what you want and what you're seeking to get out of photographing them, yes, you should be photographing, absolutely. Especially if you want to increase your wedding business, you have to have photographs of your work, whether you're creating your own separate selection guides, or you're using it for social, or you're using it for your website, you definitely have to photograph that. But if you want the high quality, you're going to have to invest in a styled shoot, or in a photographer, or have a relationship with the photographer who's doing the wedding and have them shoot and then work out whatever deal, whether it's a gratis thing for mention on social media or whether they charge you whatever. I don't know. That's up to you to work out. But definitely you can see here the red bouquet would be something similar to a lifestyle shoot that's in a bedroom in a spec home where the bridal bouquet is just laid on the bed. Great lighting, some flowers in the background, great interesting shot. The pink bouquet was a white paper background. Again, some really cool lighting that was coming into the office at the time. Snapped the photograph. And then, of course, the wedding is definitely in a venue. And it was the lighting that was in the venue, and just kind of watching the photographers before where they're going to get the photographs and kind of copying what they're doing. That's how you learn.
Susie, can I pop in? We got a few questions.
Yeah.
And Melody was asking, I think this wedding was her question from last week. She was asking for some suggestions for photographing wedding bouquets in the flower shop.
Okay, so probably the easiest thing to do would be something like the photo in the pink bouquet, where you would put it up against a little backdrop. And natural lighting is the best, because if you're going to try to do it with your overhead lighting, I hope maybe you have some windows at the front of your store. That's where you would want to go, to wherever you have the most light coming in. Even if you have to like put it in a back hallway and open the door, wherever you have the most unobstructed light coming in, whether it's a big window, a doorway, whatever, go to the closest thing you can to that and use natural lighting. And then just set it up. And I can tell you this bouquet here, how it's propped up, because that's always been the challenge to me, is how do you photograph a bouquet like that? Just if you want a real simple, shot of the bouquet, it always lays flat. So let me go here, right here in one of the, I don't know why they did that on that one. On that bottom picture where that gray line is, what that actually is showing is a piece of clear PVC pipe. And that is cut into like a little 3-inch section. And that's what's used to prop up that bouquet. So that it's clear, you don't see it. It's round enough that it's sturdy, and it will prop up the bouquet just enough so that it's not laying flat. So one suggestion would be is to, find a definite area where you have the right light, natural lighting, and then you could set it on a pedestal, you can set it on a chair, you could set it on a pillow, you can set it just on a table that has an interesting but not too busy texture, like the wood table that I used in those previous photographs, and just photograph it plain and simple and clean like that. The other thing, which is really interesting, and I don't want to, close your eyes if that bothers you. But if you look at something similar to that top photograph, granted she's holding a container, but you see a lot of these on Instagram and Pinterest, these types of photographs that they have somebody in the background, but you don't really, it's implying there's a person holding it. You don't really see their head, and they're not in a bridal gown, but they're holding a beautiful bouquet of flowers. And because of how they're holding it, and I can tell you right now, this is one of those tricks of using the portrait mode, is you hold the arrangement out in front of you as far as your arms will allow you to hold it. So you could have somebody in your flower shop stand up against a pretty brick wall or a wood wall or any kind of wall that doesn't have too much going on behind it. Have them hold the bouquet, and I know I'm in a little screen up at the top, but have them hold it out as far as they can from them, as low or however you want it. Have them hold it out as far as they can and tip the bouquet forward just a little bit, just a little tip to the forward, and then snap the photograph in portrait mode. And that's how you'll capture these kind of interesting, selfie people shots with your bouquets. Try that a couple times and play around with that. That might also help you with that. Any other questions, Janet, about that?
We've got another question. Caroline was asking, how do you get the full blank background without a line at the back between the wall and the flat surface?
Without a line, okay. So I'm going to skip around here. So some of the good things to have on hand. What I like to use, there's photo paper. You can get it online, Amazon. You can, if you have a photography store in your area, they have photo paper backdrops. Easy to use, but I find that things get damp. We work with water and we work with greenery, and if a little piece of greenery gets on that paper and it gets smudged, then now you have a little stain on your paper that you can't get off. So you waste a lot of paper. Or if it gets too damp, it might get a little wrinkly, or if you don't roll it up properly, it gets a crease or line in it. So I recommend, and what I used to use quite often, is the white faux leather fabric as my backdrop. And you get about 9 yards of it, the 54-inch wide. That's pretty much wide enough for most designs you're doing. Not anything really big like funeral work. You might have to invest in an actual backdrop for that. But the white faux leather fabric allows you to wipe it off and clean if it ever gets spilled on. So you don't have to worry if water gets spilled on it, or a petal gets dropped on it and leaves a little mark. It will clean right off. So it's really easy. It's thick enough that it doesn't really like give you any creases or wrinkles in it, because it's got the weight and heft. So it's nice flat background. So what you do to get that no line in the back is make sure that the fabric goes up at least 24 inches above your design in the back. So whether you want to, like I have here, a shower curtain rod, I usually just put that through the roll of the fabric, and then I can pull it down, and however long I want it, but you want at least 24 inches from where the top of your design is to where the fabric, ends. And then you just pull it down and just slightly curve it and have it go across the top of the table. I know you're looking at me in this little tiny screen, but it's just, and I wish I had a picture of it. Just drop and then have a slight curve in the back, have it come down over the top of your table, and let it drop right off onto the floor. So you're creating kind of like a non-stop back, and you don't want it to be flat. You want it to be curved. You want that curve in the back, and that gives you what they call like that endless background, where you really don't see that there's an end to it or that line. It doesn't create that line. You just need one continuous piece of fabric or paper that gives you that soft look. And again, even with that, you want to make sure your arrangement is a good 12 inches from that back. So when you're designing with a backdrop, whether it's paper or anything like that, you got to make sure you have that 12 inches behind and 12 inches in front, so that you can do proper cropping once you get the photograph taken. I hope that helps. I know it's hard to see without an actual photograph, but yeah, just one continuous paper and have it just kind of bend slightly. Don't try to crease it, and use the faux leather. It's really, really great. Any other questions, Janet?
I've got one more, but if you want, are you done with the slides? Maybe we can hold this one to the end.
I'm going to go back. We'll go to the end here. Let me just go back. So again, similar to wedding, especially since we're coming up to the holiday season, if any of you do decorating to your clients' homes, and that's a service that you offer, definitely be sure that you take the time once you get everything set up. And I know it's hard. I am the worst at doing that. I never get photographs. I don't want to say never, because I got these, but it's really important that if this is a service you're going to provide, that you're providing photographs of your work, so that your customers can see what you have to offer. If you're just putting on your website or your social media that, hey, we can decorate your house for Christmas, and you don't have any inspiration shots that you've actually done in other clients' houses, chances of you building that business is going to take longer than if you can actually put a visual to it. So if you don't have any photographs of houses and commercial locations that you've decorated for Christmas, make that, add that to your to-do list for this holiday season. And even if you have to, take a teenager along with you, take somebody along with you that's their primary, responsibility just for that day. Make that point to do that so that you can get some of these great shots. And again, these were all done at photo shoots, but I wanted to make sure to show you that these were photos that I took so I could have some additional like checking shots. These were all taken with a cell phone camera, believe it or not. And so, definitely you can obtain some really cool photographs. Natural lighting, and by natural I mean just the lighting that was available in the room. There was no lighting equipment set up for any of these because they were in homes and it's harder to set up lighting equipment. The only additional lighting, and we didn't do it, is in that top left photo, in that heavily wood paneled room there. There was a light put behind the Christmas tree, and that they do that as display purpose in this historical home. But to know how dark this room is, this house is old and it's very, very dark and very little light comes in. So it's just, you'd be surprised even in bad lighting conditions that you could get some great snapshots on a phone camera. So be sure to do that. Make sure you do that. So we talked about the fabric, the faux leather fabric. Again, 9 yards is what I recommend. That usually gives you enough to go high enough above an arrangement and get that nice sweep. Gives you the depth on your surface, your table surface, where you're going to place the arrangement to have that 12 feet in the back, or 12 inches, not 12 feet, 12 inches in the back, 12 inches in the front. And then just let it drop over the edge of the table so that you don't have any of those lines that were asked about. You don't have a line in the back and you won't have a line in the front because it just softly curves over the edge of the table. I use a shower curtain rod, or you could use like a 6-foot piece of PVC. That also gives you something then to roll the fabric back on so that you can put it away or it doesn't get wrinkled and creased. Double-sided tape. If you're putting up a quick little, a quick little backdrop, you'll want the double-sided tape on that, double-sided tape is to tape the fabric onto the PVC pole or the shower curtain. The blue painter's tape is to use to tape your backdrop to the wall. That way you're not going to mark any walls because the painter's tape will, come right off the wall without removing any paint, and it holds long enough to keep the backdrop in place, and it's not a permanent tape. So blue painter's tape is a good thing to have in your basket of tricks when you want to put up a quick impromptu backdrop. I don't know why there says requires time in there. Ignore that. we forgot to omit that. I don't know where that came from. One piece of white foam core, that is as kind of a reflector. If you do want to, if you have a really dark spot and you do need to enhance light, just a piece of white foam core, if you catch it in the right way with some light, that will help reflect some light where you need it most. And then the clear PVC, again, I use that to create little spacers if I want to put underneath the bridal bouquet, but you can also see by the picture there in the lower corner, it's what I use when I photograph corsages. Is a great way to display the corsage. If you're using some kind of a fancy wristlet in the flowers, it's a great way to photograph your corsage work. And again, there's something that's just on that white faux leather background. Natural lighting. I literally placed it right next to my bedroom window. This was taken in the exact same room that those other photographs were taken in. Natural lighting, and it's a really great way for you to photograph your corsage work for proms and homecomings and weddings and stuff. Canned air, that's just that's really just used to like clean the surface, so that if depending on where you're photographing, instead of having to brush everything off, which sometimes can leave marks, if you just have a little thing of canned air, you can squirt the air and it will clean off any debris on your surface so that you have a nice clean base for your arrangement. And a paintbrush kind of does the same thing, just kind of removes any debris or anything. So those are really easy, inexpensive things to have in your bag of tricks so that you can have successful photographs. Okay, now we are open. Hopefully you have lots of questions, remarks and comments, or maybe you even have some suggestions of some of the things that you do that you may want to share with everybody. You know, certainly I learn from you as well, so I'd love to hear some of those. So let's open it up for questions and see what we have. Janet, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I've got one more question because I know we're over time, but we do have this question. Would you suggest going back and editing old photos to make them look more updated, or would you just take new ones? And if you would use the old ones, how would you suggest editing them?
Great question. Here's the thing. If you have time to edit and you have the software and you know how to edit them, you know, and that's something you like to do, there's no reason why you can't do them. I mean, you can't change the arrangement, and I'm not a big proponent of doing too much Photoshop, like, you know, masking around an arrangement and putting it in a different background, because I think people are savvy enough in this day of technology that they can spy something that's been Photoshopped. So I don't necessarily recommend spending too much time or effort on doing something like that. You know, really, because if you want to stay up on times, you should be doing current things that you're creating and current styles that people are looking for and that are popular with consumers. You want to keep things up to date, so don't discard them, but I wouldn't put too much time into doing anything that you have to go back and do a lot of editing. And really, you know, the whole purpose of this is that you don't have a lot of time in your busy schedule to take lots of photographs or do elaborate shoots. And I'm hoping that some of the tricks and tips that I told you, by just having little spots, you know, even out in your flower shop, if you have a cute little wooden pedestal or a cute little table, that you position it in a way in your display that, okay, it's easy for me to like take off a couple items from that table, put my arrangement on that, and everything in the background is, you know, pretty enough because it's out in your flower shop, so you have nice displays, but it's in the background. Flip my phone to portrait mode, lower my angle, you know, find that interesting angle for that arrangement and snap that photograph, and then go, and then you have some great photographs. Certainly editing comes with doing more, you know, elaborate photo shoots, and I just think that you don't need to worry about that. You can get great photographs by, you know, quickly snapping stuff that you're creating every day.
All right, I've got another quick question. Is a white background versus a black background best?
It's not best, but it's easiest. Photographing on black can be really tricky because, I know I have one here on a black background. Sorry about where to go. Is it here? There it is. You have to be really good with your color. You have to be really precise when you're photographing on black, and you have to have really good lighting when you're photographing on black. So I love the drama that is created by a black backdrop. I think it really like gives a lot of interest and moodiness to a photograph, but it's a lot more difficult to photograph on black. So I would start off on white and, you know, kind of, you know, cut your teeth on that. And then once you feel comfortable, then experiment with other colors of backdrops, because the color of the backdrop will alter the color of the flower or the color of the arrangement or the saturation of the colors. And it also requires, you know, a little more attention to lighting. So lighting definitely is highlighted a little bit differently on colored backdrops. So I would say white is easier, but not necessarily more preferable. It's just easier.
Okay. All right. It looks like we're out of questions. Just want to thank everyone for attending today. Recording of this will be available on demand on the FTD Mercury Network Florist YouTube channel. And for more education programming, visit ftdi.com to register for upcoming sessions and view the past education programs on demand. So thanks everyone and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, FTD, for inviting me to join everyone here and really be on the lookout for upcoming FTD educational opportunities and webinars, and invite your friends as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.